Okay, now we're going to work on Chapter 5, Quieting the Mind. And we're going to take the concepts that I've gone over, purpose, claim, tone, and bias, and we're going to look at them through the lens of this chapter. So before we start, it's probably a really good idea for you to pause here and go back through the chapter, just kind of page through it, make sure it's fresh in your mind, and have your QQMS out in front of you so that you can follow and revise things as needed. If you've already submitted your QQMS, it is perfectly fine to revise as we go over some of the concepts here and then resubmit. I will always look at the most recent file in your assignment folder. Okay, so Slater's purpose. Remember, purpose is modes of discourse, and there are 4. Narration, telling a story. Description, sensory detail. Exposition is writing to inform or explain. Persuasion is writing to convince. Okay? Actually, Slater does all of that, right? So first, narration. Here, she's telling a story. She is. And really, for this whole presentation, I'm going to focus solely on the part where I call it the Audrey part of the chapter. It's where Slater says, I know a story, right? And she talks about Linda and Audrey, and that's really the meat of the chapter. It's kind of like she introduces Festinger, spends a little time on his experiments, and then goes and uses Audrey as a huge illustration of Festinger's theory. And so I'm going to focus on that part of the chapter. And so it is narrative. She is telling the story of her visit to see Audrey and Linda. It's also descriptive because she's trying to create this dominant impression of how she sees Audrey and Linda. You know, right from the beginning, she doesn't trust what's happening. She doesn't believe in the miracle, and she thinks Linda's just using it to justify what happened to Audrey. So she's going to be describing the scene. If you think of the first time she sees Audrey and the Jesus statues, how she reacts and how she describes those is super important, right? Because she's trying to create that dominant impression of it all being kind of ridiculous. Next, it's expository because she does continue to explain Festinger's theory and how it applies in the case of Audrey and Linda. She cites some more experts in the field. She does a lot of explaining. She wants you to understand why, at first, Linda and Audrey are an example of Festinger's theory, and then later she's trying to convince you, because here's the persuasive part, first to prove Linda's cognitive dissonance of Linda over Audrey's accident, but later, once she's around them, remember, she changes. She's not trying to prove Linda's wrong for the way she's using Audrey, right? Instead, she sees the love between Linda and Audrey, and so instead at the end, she's trying to convince us that Festinger missed this middle ground between dissonance and consonance where, quote, new theories take shape. At the end, we'll talk a lot about that end, but she's trying to convince us that maybe Festinger missed something. We're not all rationalizing beings. Not everything we do can be rationalized. Sometimes we change our minds, and Festinger didn't leave room in his theory for that. Okay, so she accomplishes all 4 purposes in this Audrey section of the text. Next, her claim. So here's where I want you to look at your QQMS. All right, what did you write down as the main idea? What did you say her topic was? And what was the controlling idea? Remember, there's 2 things we're thinking about. What does she want us to know about Festinger or cognitive dissonance? And then how does that help us answer those guiding questions? Who are we? What makes us human? Are we truly the authors of our own lives? What does it mean to be moral? What does it mean to be free? So sometimes, again, that is accomplished in 1 sentence, and sometimes, like in one of the chapters we just did, we needed 2. Okay, I think it was Skinner. All right, so Slater's thesis for chapter 5. Now, if you look on the right, I have a note here. I said revise your thesis on your QQMS. Right? So if you don't have what I have, and again, it's not word for word, but if you don't have the same idea that I have, it's important that you revise your QQMS. Don't erase your original thinking, leave that there, and just incorporate mine as well, but make sure that you use a different color so you can handwrite it on there and then take a picture of it, or you can type it on there in a different colored font and then re-upload your QQMS if you've already done that. It is okay to revise your work, but it's important to document your learning, so I want to see what you thought originally. All right, so the topic is Festinger and cognitive dissonance. The controlling idea is at the end. There's a middle ground that Festinger missed between consonance and dissonance where new beliefs form. Okay, so here's my thesis. In Chapter 5 of Opening Skinner's Box, Slater writes about Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance, but after meeting Audrey and Linda Santo and facing something she can't explain or rationalize, Slater concludes that Festinger missed the middle ground between consonance and dissonance where new beliefs can form. Now, there's my thesis, right? It accounts for the very end of the chapter. Okay. So, tone. Remember, tone is all about voice. How does Slater sound, right? You're listening for emotions. So when we talk about tone, you should be giving me emotional words. How does she sound, right? And so in the beginning, I've pulled out some words. So here's just some example of quotes, right? So first I have, the Santo story is classic Festinger, the way the mother's mind twists to turn a terrible tragedy into something of salvage. Consonance achieved through a series of rapid rationalizations. How I wonder would a person who so embodies Festinger's theory actually react to its explication. All right, so you see her words, right? Terrible tragedy, something of salvage. Consonance achieved through a series of rapid rationalizations. Again, she does not trust Linda. She thinks again that Linda has taken her daughter's accident, and she felt so guilty about what happened to her daughter and so traumatized by it that she made her a saint, and that justified Audrey drowning. See, she was supposed to become this saint. She was supposed to save all these people, and that's why this happened, right? And so she thinks that's classic Festinger. She doesn't trust Linda, and she doesn't believe in Audrey. And so that's how she feels at the beginning, okay? And then she talks to Linda on the phone, and Linda says, quote, I doubt whether suffering has meaning. Well, right away, Slater kind of hones in on that, and she goes, what? Are you changing your mind? Have you stopped, practicing cognitive dissonance? Are you starting to understand something different? And so she sees Linda in some suspended place where beliefs break up and form new patterns we cannot quite see. So again, the beliefs breaking up is now all of a sudden, because Linda has cancer, she's doubting whether suffering has meaning. So Slater can't wait to meet her to see what she does now. Does she rationalize it, or does she form a new belief? So then she seems kind of critical of Festinger's theory. She says, quote, dissonance theory falls a little short because it accounts only for the way we reify narratives and not for the way we revise them. In doing so, dissonance is presented as a unidimensional state, a kind of senseless clanging, when in fact the sound of something out of tune can also sharpen our ears and seed new songs. I apologize for the typo there. Okay, so if you look at some of the quotes, I have unidimensional state, senseless clanging. That's how she's now defining Festinger's theory. And when she says sharpen our ears and seed new songs, isn't that beautiful? It's like when we create new learning or new ideas form, we're sharpening our ears and seeding new songs, which sounds wonderful, right? So that's really positive, where this unidimensional state and senseless clanging is really negative. All right, so in the middle of the text, see, she's starting to question everything. She says, I don't know why the statue weeps, why the bead of blood is in the chalice. I came here looking for Linda's willingness to tolerate dissonance, but what I found, in some very small sense, is my own. All of a sudden, the focus of the story is shifting from Linda's willingness to tolerate dissonance all of a sudden to cognitive dissonance in Lauren Slater because she can't explain the oil, right? And then, remember, the whole focus now is Slater's wondering why, if Linda is so sick with cancer, why she doesn't have her own daughter heal her, right? And so she says, a mother, this is Linda's explanation, a mother doesn't ask that of her child, Linda said. A mother doesn't give suffering, she takes it away. And then Lauren says, this might be rationalization, a way for Linda to avoid her daughter's failing by simply never asking her, and thus the story stays intact. But it's more than that. It's also an act of deep caring. I hear Linda now crooning to her daughter, and someone gurgles in return, and for almost 2 decades now she's done this, day in, day out, ministered. So you can see I pulled words, crooning, ministered. Ministered is very much a Christian word. It's very much a Jesus word. Jesus ministered to the sick day in, day out. And now all of a sudden, Linda's been doing that. And so Lauren is witnessing that love, right? At the end of the chapter, when she goes back, she says, quote, "To tell the truth, I don't know why I'm here. I came to Linda because I wanted to observe something entering dissonance and putting together a new paradigm because of it, but she didn't show me that. She clung instead to her justifications, her rationalizations, but with so much love. Is it the love I am drawn to, this mother and daughter woven together by years of breath and touch, or is it that I am drawn to the dissonance I am experiencing, the fact that the weird things happening here in this house rankle against my notion of how the world works, and I want to figure it out?" So all of a sudden, Slater's tone is very much conflicted. She doesn't know what she's seeing, right? And so you see that. First, she super admires Linda, crooning, ministered, mother and daughter woven together by years of breath and touch. You can see the admiration there. But then she says, weird things happening here and rankle, right? And she keeps saying, I don't know why the statue weeps. I don't know why I'm here. And so she's questioning. She is now in that middle ground, right? Where new learning takes place. And then at the end, here's the very last line of the entire piece. Perhaps I am seeing things, but the nature of those things I cannot quite tell. Who knows? Maybe God makes himself known through a cheap plastic relic in a ranch-style house. I really, really cannot say for sure. I am between stories, pending a paradigm, without justification or rationalization, a rich and profound place to be. Here for this moment, hanging between consonance and dissonance, I am quiet, I am peaceful. This is what Festinger's experiments missed, what it's like to live in the gap between consonance and dissonance, where new theories take shape, new beliefs are about to be born, or something much smaller, just a person, just me, with my hands held out, my body held high, wide open, no ending. So, how can you tell? How does Slater feel now? She says, I cannot quite tell. Cheap plastic relic. I really, really cannot say for sure. Rich, profound, quiet, peaceful, wide open, no ending, right? All of a sudden, she's the one. She's the one in the middle where her new theories are taking shape, right? And so her tone at the end, I feel like, is that rich, profound, quiet. She's peaceful at the end, right? She's decided to form a new belief. So it's subjective. We can look at this and say Slater's tone is super subjective. First, she judges Linda, arguing before meeting her that she turned her daughter into a saint to justify the drowning. She judges the whole scene the first time she sees it. Everywhere I look are statues dripping oil with tiny Dixie cups tied to their chins to catch the royal runoff. That sounds ridiculous, right? She presses the cotton ball to the wet saints and then drops the swab into a Ziploc bag. Jesus is weeping grease. She's making fun of it. She doesn't like it. She doesn't believe in it. And so it sounds really, really ridiculous, right? But then she witnesses the love and begins to change, as her cognitive dissonance section is about, not Linda's. At the end, Slater is so peaceful and standing Jesus-like, with her hands out, her body held high, wide open, no ending. She has a very Jesus statue-like pose at the end, and that is that new belief, right? And so she's very subjective. Is she biased? Absolutely. Biased towards, in the end, Linda and her love for her daughter. In the end, she's biased towards a middle ground where we can form new beliefs. And she's against Festinger's theory that we are a rationalizing people, that we use beliefs to justify our actions, not that we believe first and act accordingly. So she's against Festinger's theory, and she's biased towards this middle ground. All right, so now it's your turn to try it. You're going to use The Parent Who Stays by Reina Grande, and you're going to take that essay through the 4 concepts. So just open a new document, number 1 through 4. You're going to say, what is the author's purpose? Talk about those modes of discourse. What is Reina Grande doing in her essay? Is it narrative, exposition, persuasion, or description, or is it a combination of a bunch of them? What is the claim? Remember, that's thesis. So if you did a blue sheet on this, you should be looking at that. What is her tone? How does she feel about her topic? And is she biased? Yes or no? And what's she slanted towards and against? When you're done, upload to the assignment folder